Hi everyone, thank you all for joining. My name is Abby, I'm a senior consultant at Turner & Townsend. We're joined today by Matt Greaves, who's an associate director at Turner & Townsend. So this is a Retrofit Information Support and Expertise, or RISE event, which is fully funded by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero and delivered by Turner & Townsend. I will hand over to Matt to kick off today's presentation.
Great, thanks Abby. Welcome everyone. Nice to be running through the session with you today. By way of introduction, as I've said, my name is Matt Greaves. I'm an Associate Director here at Turner & Townsend. Why am I talking to you today about gaining senior management buy-in? I guess partly because of my experience both with within social housing, but also within other organisations at a senior level and a leadership level, at both ends of that kind of senior management buy-in process. So to be able to share some kind of experiences from that, and to really kind of give a bit of a foundational kind of one-on-one level run through of a couple of key aspects within this. Obviously, we'll be making this applied to major retrofit projects, but a lot of this is quite generic and applies to lots of different projects and programs. So without further ado, we'll get into the body of the presentation. Let's say two key areas that we'll be talking through today. One is around building a good business case, and then the second is around gaining that buy-in and telling the story of your project, of your program, to maintain enthusiasm and excitement around it. So let me click through. So building a good business case. So I guess what is a good business case? What should it seek to do? It should absolutely help stakeholders understand and influence the shape of the project. I think fundamentally it's about making decision makers able to make the decisions that they need to make. So they need to understand the costs, the benefits, the risks, the factors associated with the project, that helps them understand how important it is, how risky it is, how it relates to other priorities that might exist within the organisation. It should be absolutely clear what the purpose of the project is, and this should be kind of maintained throughout the project life. It gives the opportunity for stakeholders to see that this is a very well thought through project from inception, and it then can provide a reference point to look back at and to look at where the benefits have been realised, and whether outputs and outcomes have been delivered as per the plan. So it's absolutely fundamental to the startup of a significant, successful project. So I guess there's a question, do we really need to be building business cases for what seems to be intuitively a common sense thing to do? Surely everyone's bought into the need for reducing the carbon emissions from housing stock, for making energy more affordable for residents. But actually, as you will well know, across all organisations and especially across social housing, there's lots of competing priorities, for not just for money and resources, but for bandwidth within organisations. So it's really important to make sure that the story is well told, that the business case is very clear, so that this is set with the right level of importance within the organisation. So what is a business case? It's not meant to be a mechanical process. It's not meant to just be a systematic process that just pushes out an output. It is absolutely the opportunity to engage with key stakeholders to make a dynamic project position. So it shouldn't be static. Now, notwithstanding that once a business case is approved, it shouldn't be tinkered with outside of governance kind of processes, but it can be amended, adjusted, change over time. But clearly, once a business case has been approved and the benefits and resources have been set, clearly any substantial change to that need to go through proper kind of governance channels and be recorded so that everyone knows what is expected, both in terms of input and in terms of outputs. But really, the business case itself is one part of that wider journey, that journey of communication, of engagement, of planning, of preparation, and then of getting into the delivery phases. So there's 3 key questions really to be thinking about within the build of that business case. So why are you proposing the project? The what is the project and what is it going to deliver? And then the how. So how are you going to actually get around to delivering it? And this is quite neatly set out in the next slide with a bit more granular detail. I'll just click through this so you can see how the why, the what, and the how are covered off across those themes. So the why, very much this should be linked into the strategic purpose of the organisation. So strategic purpose of the project, and then how that relates to the strategic purpose of the organisation. And again, across local authorities, across social housing providers, there will undoubtedly be some strategic objectives linked to fuel poverty, through to asset conditions and homes that are fit for purpose, great customer service, right through then into kind of responding to the challenges of climate change and so on and so forth. So there will normally be some really clear connections to major retrofit projects and the strategic purpose of the organisation, but it's important to make sure that they are very clearly linked within the business case, often using exactly the same language that's used within standard organisational documents, whether it be the organisation's strategy or its business plan, whatever it happens to be. So making that very, very clear connection of this business plan, that this business case, is delivering the strategic purpose of the organisation through the purpose of the project. So the how then, quite detailed stuff here in terms of what resources are needed, in terms of financial resource, in terms of people, in terms of resource within the organisation and resource that you need to bring in to support the process as well. So what are those resources? And very closely linked to that then, what are the costs? Now, often those costs might be set, especially for a longer term project. You might use net present value or internal rate of return to reflect the change in value of money over time. But in essence, you want to tell a story about what is it going to cost the organisation to take this project forward. From a procurement perspective then, how are you going to engage with the products and the services that you need to get this project delivered? What are the tactics in doing that? And then from a financing perspective, how are you going to fund this? Is it through an element of grant funding? Is it through, and then in terms of the money being put forward by organisations, is it through more normal budgetary allocations? Is it that you need to seek additional money off the market? Are you going to be loaning money? What's this going to do to your kind of lending ratios as an organisation? And of course, you'll be seeking to kind of get that information from the finance teams to support that. So furthermore then on the how, you want a clear then delivery plan, give people confidence that this is deliverable and how it's going to be and how that's going to play out. And then from a risk management perspective, setting out what those key risks would be around the project, and of course the mitigation to reduce those risks. So all of those hows actually also flagged to you and to the author of the business case some key stakeholders to be engaged with in the development of that business case. So finance team, procurement teams, delivery teams, possibly HR if there's a recruitment aspect here, risk teams. So yeah, it starts introducing who needs to be engaged with and who you need to be bringing on board. So then from a what perspective, it absolutely should be clear on what are the retrofit actions that you're seeking to deliver. And that might kind of be organized around particular measures, particular retrofit measures. It might be organized around a process, around how using PAS and different processes is going to take you through a journey. If you're not sure what those retrofit actions might be at a particular moment in time, what is the process that's going to shape that out? And then really importantly, what's the outcome? And what's the outcome from the perspective of different stakeholders as well? So from a resident perspective, from or customer perspective, from an asset management perspective, from a strategic perspective, and then that should be able to be articulated through in terms of specific benefits, and those benefits should be quantified and should be referenced moving forward in terms of checking the performance of the project. So that might be the number of properties improved, it might be the amount of carbon reduced, it might be the amount customers' bills are reduced by, it might be the kilowatt hours saved, lots of different kind of quantifiable benefits that should be kind of built into that business case with varying degrees of confidence around that. And again, you can absolutely make that clear within the business case as well. So to recap, it's not meant, a business case it isn't just about the document, it's about the process of stakeholder engagement, bringing things together into a very clear narrative as to what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, that can be referred back to throughout the process, not just at initial gateways to get approvals, but as you head off into delivery processes as well. So we'll move on now into the buy-in and telling the story part of the presentation. So why do we need leadership buy-in? I mean, it's largely self-evident, I'm sure, in terms of needing to gain approval for the resources that are needed to deliver the project effectively and efficiently. It gives that organizational top cover. There will, of course, be issues, there will be barriers, there will be challenges, and to have that organizational top cover is always valuable to help kind of unpick that and to drive the project through. Senior leadership will also be able to support and facilitate engagement with external stakeholders, whether that be through channels within the organization or outside, but it'll certainly support that external stakeholder engagement piece. Organizational priorities will change, so to have that senior leadership buy-in gives the organizational commitment, and it also enables advocates to advocate for the project and to make sure that it is set at the right level of priority within the organization. Of course, this will depend on the organization and on the scale of the project. In some cases, if it was a fairly small retrofit project, it might be a moderate to lower priority versus a much more substantial project that might be seen as a key kind of transformational project within the organization. So yeah, a whole variety of reasons why you would want to have senior management buy-in. And of course, that senior management buy-in shouldn't simply be within your channel of the organization So whether if you're in a sustainability team or an asset management team, it's not just the senior management within that channel. It's got to be much broader across the whole organization. And we can see that now within the next slide. So as well as that senior management and senior leadership buy-in, it's important to get buy-in across all of the different functional elements that will be supporting the project. Some of these are shown on the slide here. So whether that be a sustainability team, strategic asset management, customer service orientated teams, whether that be at a strategic level, whether that be at a neighborhood level, or whether that be at a call center level, all will play a part within the successful delivery of a major retrofit project. Likewise, bringing in teams working with leaseholders is often very valuable, and of course across all of those, whether they be head ofs, deputy directors, or key subject matter experts within each of those segments. And of course, every organisation will be organised slightly differently, and be slightly different teams and slightly different names. But that breadth of input needs to help. If we think back to the business case, help form the business case, but then also help generate organisational enthusiasm and energy for the project, and then obviously help get it delivered as well. So in terms of telling the story, we've kind of touched on this a little bit with the business case, but three areas we just want to touch on here. One is creating a compelling story, aligning the story with the goals of your organisation, and then how we might get the opportunity to tell that story. So the next slide just drills into that in a little bit more into a little bit more detail. So the story itself, the what, the why, and the how, they're exactly the same subheadings as we used within the business case. So that business case is really the story. Again, it can be told at different levels of extent. So it can be a very kind of small, snappy piece, and almost like an elevator pitch, which we'll touch on in the next slide, or it can be a kind of a full, comprehensive kind of story and narrative around this. All of the storytelling around the project, should set very clearly around the alignment for the organisation. Why is this important for the organisation? What is it delivering for the organisation? So again, that links to those strategic objectives. Where is the organisation at the moment? Where does it fit with competing priorities? Why is this a must-do project? It needs to be cognizant of the wider drivers, so societal drivers, regulatory drivers, to help inform that, and then the specific needs, the needs of internal and external stakeholders. And this leads neatly into the kind of the telling the story piece, because I think there's a really valuable aspect here to be able to tell, not only to tell the story yourselves of what the project is seeking to do and how it's going to deliver it, but also what it means to the different stakeholders. And obvious stakeholders would be residents. So if you can tell the story about what it means to a particular resident or a particular group of residents, then that can be really powerful for some stakeholders. But likewise, if you can understand what it means for those within your organization, for the strategic asset managers who might have been wrestling with how to deal with some of these non-traditional build types for many years, what's their reaction? Can you tell the story from their perspective as well? So how we go about telling the story? Well, we need to be ready to tell the story in lots of different ways. When we think about the business case, we would normally expect to be able to land that in a quite structured way within either an executive committee meeting or an investment committee meeting, or some kind of governance process. So that should be more structured. However, there should be the opportunity, and you should create the opportunity to tell the story in lots of other situations as well. So whether it be one-to-ones with those stakeholders, whether it be in opportunistic conversations that you might have on the fringes of other meetings, or on the fringes of other projects, you need to kind of build different ways of telling that story for different stakeholders. using different phraseology. Now, a classic way of kind of building some thinking around this is to start with the priority issues. So this kind of inverted pyramid of what do you really need to communicate? What does the stakeholder really need to know? And then layer that down with more and more detail depending on the situation and the environment. And that then helps make sure that when you do get the opportunity to communicate and tell that story, that you're landing the key points. And often, there's lots of kind of research and pieces, TED Talks and so on and so forth. Yeah, lots of focus on making 3 key points. So you might want to keep that in mind. What are the 3 things? What are the 3 benefits? What are the 3 key things that stakeholder needs to know, or that stakeholder group needs to know, whether it be your executive, your residents, the delivery teams, whatever it happens to be. So you need to be thinking about telling that in different ways. And I guess from experience, what I often find is when you do go to have that more structured conversation, whether it be a business case, say with an executive committee, what you might find is you've got a 12-slide deck and a 20-minute slot in that meeting, and then you turn up and actually they're massively overrunning, and they say, can you boil this down to a 3-4 minute pitch and then tell us what you need us to do. So in the moment, then you need to be able to shift from that full comprehensive storytelling to nailing 3 or 4 key points really quickly and really efficiently. And this again is kind of in the lift, in the elevator, and you've got 60 seconds to tell the story. As I said, I think there's a lot of value in developing that elevator pitch. You probably won't deliver it in an elevator, but the circumstance will arise, I'm sure. So another thing to think about is what kind of personality type different stakeholders might be, how different stakeholders operate, how they think, how they work, so that you can tailor your information, your story, your key points to each of those individuals in a different way. And there's lots of different ways that this is kind of carved out. In terms of, you can see a couple on the screen there in terms of owls and hawks, doves and peacocks, thinkers, directors, relators, creators. You've got kind of Myers-Briggs type stuff. But in essence, this all boils down to knowing your audience. So if you have the opportunity in advance to think about how your audience likes to operate and what you think you know about the audience, then you can start creating your narrative, your key points in a slightly different way, depending on that group. There is a danger of overthinking this a little bit, but if you can kind of at least be prepared to land different messages in different ways with different stakeholder groups, and if you can practice how you can kind of adapt that in the moment, then that would be absolutely perfect. So when we touch on that senior level buying piece, yes, we need to make sure that message of alignment lands, so it's fully clear what this means for the organization, why it's important to the organization, and how it hooks into delivering the strategic objectives of the organization. If we go back to that kind of executive committee, investment committee type environment, we also need to keep in mind what we need them to do. I've had a number of circumstances where you come out of those kind of sessions and it's not abundantly clear if the mandate has been given or not, or if it was conditional or not conditional. So it's important to kind of lead that position within those sessions so that you are very clear what you want from that stakeholder group. Is it that you want authorization to proceed? Is it that you want a commitment of time and resources? is it something else? But be absolutely clear what you need, and in some ways hold those groups to account to give you or not give you that, but at the very least to give you a decision and to give you a position. What you can't really afford to do is to have the opportunity to land these business cases and these narratives and these stories and these messages with those important groups and not come away with what you need in terms of gaining that decision, gaining that clarity, making sure it's within the minutes, because that's the kind of the lever that you can then use to drive the project forward from there. So other aspects from a senior management perspective is to understand the ongoing governance arrangements around a project or a program. So how's it going to be governed? Is it going to be a new project management organization that kind of sits around it, or a program management organization? Is it going to sit within a current kind of governance stream? Is it within a property services group or within a major projects group, or is the investment committee going to keep a governance role within it? So just making sure that that's all kind of understood, and that any kind of risk management and governance processes, reporting processes are all kind of fully recognised. Because what should be happening then is that the outcomes at the end of the project and throughout the project, as they're captured, the benefit realisation piece, that then should be being checked against the narrative that you've set out and the business case that you've set out, so that lessons can be learned, so that everyone can recognise the strengths and weaknesses of the project. Because of course, as we all know, projects very rarely deliver in the same way as they're planned. Things will change, so it's a great opportunity to use that as a reference point. Thanks, everyone.